So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unify Cost Management Training Part 3, which is focused on cash flow. So today we're going to take what we did in the first session when we set up a project and a budget and a contract, and what we've done in the second session in setting up, doing contract administration and managing that contract, and taking all of that information to produce a contract cash flow. And we're going to do it in a few different ways, because there's lots of ways to go about doing cash flows in Unify. And we're going to look at a bunch of the different methods that are available. So just to give you a bit of an overview of that, we're going to be doing some manual phasing, where you look at some dates and key in some numbers. So basic, straightforward. We're going to do some auto phasing. And that will also include benchmark phasing, where we use history of what's happened on previous projects to generate the cash flow for our current project. Then we'll look at doing our forecast and auto phasing that. We'll import some phasing from Excel. And we'll take a look at contract level phasing as well. And then the PCG report that we did at the end of the last session, we will update that to include our cash flow data to round out everything. So let's start off by looking at manual phasing of our budget. So here we are again, starting with the end in mind. Here's a report in Unify. So this is an embedded report, which shows the baseline cash flow here, which is this red line here. And then here we've got the actuals up to this point, and then the forecast from that point there. So this is what we're going to essentially be creating today on our project, starting with our baseline. Then we will have some actuals. If you did the training session last week, you will have an actual in there from the progress claim that we processed last week. So not much of an actual, but something. And then we'll be doing our forecast to see if we're going to be meeting that. So what I want to do is to go into my project, which was the mass production facility. And then I'm going to go to the costs module. And then to the manual phasing. And what I can see here is a 12-month view, starting from the most recent month with activity, which was October. And on the left, we have our list of cost codes, so that code structure that we've been working with through these training sessions. And you can see it's got its 3 levels to it: the project level up the top, the header levels, which we have here that we can see on screen as construction and authority charges, and then the detailed codes that we actually use, and we code everything to it. The lowest level, level 3 in this case, so that 100.1 early works, 100.2 main works, and so on. And what we can see there as well is that in the project total column, there's an allocated budget and actual / forecast. So the budget, if you recall, we did in the first session, we set up our budget here in the budget module. And, you know, we have our approved and our original budgets, and we can have various versions of the budget. The version of the budget that you're seeing in manual phasing here is the current budget. Now, the current budget is not the approved budget in Unify. The current budget is the budget that you're editing So if I was to, change that to 5 million and just hit save, and then go across to manual phasing, I'll see now that that budget amount there is now 5 million against early works demolition. Now, when I go to my dashboard and look at this, I can see that early works demolition is worth only 4 million or 4.7 million. So to know that I'm working with the right budget amount, what I can do is check that and update this current one to reflect the one I want to be working against. So what I can do in this version here is select my approved budget and click use as current. And that, yes, it will override that, but that's fine. And that way, if I've done that, the other thing I could have done here was use the compare to as well, and don't compare to my approved budget and say, yes, there are no variances there, that all matches. So that's fine. So that way I know when I'm in my manual phasing here, looking at this, that I am looking at my approved budget position, if that's what I needed to do. So that's just a way of checking that. Now, the actual forecast here is coming from our forecast to complete view, which we've looked at a couple of times. And we've talked about how this is built up from the contracts, variations, pending contracts, the untendered amount, which you'll recall is being set to auto calculate here. And then our remaining contingency and our comparison to our approved budget over here. So this forecast figure here from forecast to complete is combining this actual / forecast in the project total here. Then we have the phased total. And this only has one figure in it, this $82,700. Now, if I scroll down, we'll see that that's coming from consultants. And what's more, it's coming from the architect code. And this actually matches the progress claim that we did against the architect's contract last week. Now, because last week was in last month in October, we're seeing that as an actual for October. But you can actually look at this up here to decide when you want to see actuals from and when you want to see forecast from. So if I change that to...
Sorry, Simon, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Why I don't have these buttons on the top of the panel, save, copy budget, and import? No.
Are you in your project?
Yeah.
Diana?
I'm in your project, mass production.
Yeah, so you don't have editing rights to my project. So you don't get the button. So you have viewing rights, so you can see this information, but you don't have editing rights. If you go into your project, you will have the buttons because you will have editing rights to that.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. No, that was a very good question. So it's to do with the way access is controlled in Unify, that you can be set up in one project to be able to see the information, but not be able to edit it.
Sorry, Simon. I was a bit late and I can't get into the software. I need the login.
So as I was saying, the phase total here at the moment is just the actuals, and we're going to be populating this phase total during this training session and seeing how that works. And then we've got month by month going across on the right here. And as you can see, we've got a variance here because it's a variance between this number and this number. So there's no phased budget. So, the variance is the full amount. And up here, we can control various things. So we can see when we view this from. So, we could take viewing a financial year, select it from July, and show me a financial year, or from, the current month, just from November. I just want to see that. Whatever you need to do. Actuals too. So this you can play around with to select the point at which you're viewing actuals up to. Now, if your system administrator is closing off financial periods, closing off months in Unify, then the most recent closed period will be the first one to select. So in this one, that's the case. So when I select October, and let's just say back and view it from October, here, you'll see that the actual line, actual/forecast line, is grayed out here, and I can't enter any data in there. That means October is now closed. It's a closed financial period, and we're only seeing actuals for that period. But if I was to say, show me actuals to, say, January, it would move that line up to January. And if there were any actuals, so for instance, if you processed any actuals in the current month in November, it would show them. Now we haven't, so it's blank, but that's how that works. So typically for you, that will be the most recent month, but it may be that you can play around with that. Now, again, we've got our cost code filter here to look at the cost code that we're playing around in or working in. And in this case, we're working with the post-contract one. And like any other place where we can look at these, we can look at different depths. We can change this from currency to percentage, which we're going to play around with in a moment. We can change our currency if we have currency set up. And we can choose to look at actual forecast, all, or budget. Now, right now, I'm just going to change this to budget, which is going to simplify this view here. And I'm just seeing these lines and a budget amount. The other thing I'm going to do is change this to percentage. And what that allows me to do is to enter some percentage amounts in against these line items, and Unify will convert them into dollars. So we say 10, 10, 10. And that should be 100%, which it is, because you'll see that has told me now I've phased that whole $34 million. And if I change this back to currency, that will change that into currency. And I have, so that's a quick and easy way to phase a particular line item. If you know the sort of spread that you're doing, or, oh, we're going to get $10 a month from this. I mean, 10% a month from this, you just do 10%, 10%, 10% across. And it's a quick and easy way to phase. I can, of course, type in numbers, which is, fun if you like doing that. But much slower. And that will eventually phase that out. And I can always see what my remaining amount is there. 0 in that one. And I will and put the rest of that in there. And saving as I go, I can see, with this variance here, when I've got the whole thing phased. So have a play with that, do some manual phasing. And if you have any questions, so of course, if you want to look at other financial years, we've got this phase from function here. I showed you how you can select that by doing a month. What I didn't show you is you can go forward 12 months at a time. So if I click on that, that'll show me from October 2022, October 2023, and so on. It's a quick way to move around. Now, we're going to do some other phasing methods now. So, and I'll talk about these ones later, copy budget and rebaseline and import. But I don't want to use this phasing that we've just put in manually. I want to get rid of it. And the easiest way to do that is to click on that cost code thing here, which selects all the cost codes, and that gives me a clear button. I hit that clear, and my budgeted phase total will now disappear because I don't have it anymore. So now I could have just, selected a particular line item and cleared that. Now that's useful if you've got something in there on one particular line and that's wrong, and you want to scrap it and start again. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to do some so we've manually phased our budget. So now we're going to do auto phasing of our budget. And we're going to use some other modules of Unify to help us with this. So there's the auto phasing bit there, but we're not going to go there yet. Instead, we are going to go to the time module. So when I'm in the time module, I can see here there's no time data matching your project filters at the moment. So there's nothing to show me here. I've got this little toggle here, switch between a timeline and a Gantt, but there's nothing to see. So I'm going to go from the dashboard view to the schedule view. And what we can see here, we have our life cycle phases that apply to this project. Now these they may be different in the project you're working in, depending on the portfolio filter settings that you have or the project metadata. And they may be different in your deployment of Unify. So these are set up by your system administrator. And these are the ones that we have set up that applies to this project in this deployment of Unify. So it can be much more specific than this. So what I'm going to do is enter some baseline dates. And, you know, these we don't really have to get too tied up on this. So I'm just going to enter one set of dates for concept design and another one for construction, just to keep it simple. So I'm not going to use all of them. So for concept design, let's say we started that on the 1st of September 2021. And it goes until the end of November there. So you can see when I click in here, I get a date selector, and I can use that date selector backwards and forwards to select a date, or I can type in a date. Either way. So let's just skip the other parts of the design phase. And let's say from December, 1st of December, easy to select it there. We're in construction. And let's say we're in construction for 12 months through to the, if I click on the year, go forward a year, November 2022. And then let's say we have a defects period from 1st of December 2022 to the 30th of November 2023. So I hit save, and there is my there's my Gantt chart here. So design phase, construction phase, scroll down, defects period. There we go. Once I'm happy with that, I can hit copy baseline, and it will copy this across to from my baseline to my actual /forecast. Now, the actual date here, Unify has taken from the date we set up the project, which was the 20th of October. Now, I can manually change that back. Let's say we'll manually change that back to the 1st of October. So we can see here that we planned to start on the project at the beginning of September. We didn't until the end of the start of October, but apparently we're still going to get the design done in that time, and there's no variance there between the two. So there we are. So we just want to have those dates in there, and we're going to use those dates to help us forecast. So I should point out as well, while you're having a play, that the concept design phase here has got an asterisk next to it. If I hover on that, it says this is the current phase. Now, the only place where that'll get a bit tricky is remembering that the current phase is the one you're in now. So your actual dates have to be within the date that you are in now. So for instance, if I was to say, oh, this ended on the 31st of October and hit save, well, Unify's not getting grumpy at me. But that was a Unify 16 thing. In the Unify you're using in your, I'll put it back to the 30th because that's what I want it to be. So actually it's a Unify 17, our latest release, actually doesn't get grumpy at you about such things. The version of Unify you're using, if it's earlier than version 17, it won't have the time module. All this information will be in the summary module, not in this new time module. That will get grumpy at you. But currently, the latest version doesn't. So there's a lot more flexibility around the dates now with the current module. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone has got some baseline dates, they've copied those dates, and they've got some forecast dates. Don't have to be the same as this, just some dates to play with. There's an import button here as well. You can import data from Microsoft Project and Primavera P6 if you're using those to manage your schedule, which can be useful to, then use that information to do other things in Unify and to report on it. So we are going to go back into the costs module again. And this time we're going to go into auto phasing. So now we've got our auto phasing view. Now we need to make sure we're against our post-contract chart of accounts that we're playing around in. And we want our auto phasing set to budget. You'll see it can be set to budget or forecast. So we're going to do budget. So we are going to set some auto phasing options here. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, I'm going to take the main works one here, and I'm going to set that to be an S-curve. Well, let me start by doing it up the top. Okay, so up the top here, under bulk phasing, there's a whole lot of things, and we're going to look at benchmarking shortly, but a whole lot of options to play with. And if I select S-curve and then life cycle whole project, you will see so when I select a bulk phasing method up here, in this case S-curve, and then select whole of project, what Unify does is uses the data that we put in into the time module, and in this case, the baseline data. So our budget gets linked to our baseline data and populates that against all of these line items to just use a basic S-curve to create the profile for us. So I hit save, and there we are. We can see month by month that has, so when we hit save, it takes us to the manual phasing view. Let's go forward 12 months. There's our S-curve, and just every line item is S-curve that way. If I go to the dashboard, there's that S-curve here against the, so we can see that cash flow. So it's S-curved out the whole thing. So that's a very simple auto phasing method where you use just this bulk phasing here to do everything. Now I'm going to do something that's much more nuanced than that. So what I'm going to do is start with the main works here. And I'm looking at that going, well, that's not going to be for the whole project because we're not going to spend that money in the defects period, and we're not going to be spending in the design period. So if I'm just S-curving the whole thing, that doesn't really make sense. So instead, I'm going to S-curve it just for the construction period. And you'll see that's already changed those dates there. The other thing I'm doing is saying, well, a lot of this stuff is going to be related to what happens with the construction period. For instance, the FF&E, so the furniture, fittings, and equipment, that's going to be related to what happens with the construction period. So I'm going to change the life cycle here to none and instead use a code relationship. And what I'm going to use finish start because the fit out is happening towards the end of the construction period. So we'll say finish start. We're still sticking with our chart of accounts post-contract here and linking it to the main works. Now, when I put in a duration in here, let's say we're expecting that FF&E to go over, say, 4 months. So what that's doing is that's starting at 4 months out from the end of the construction period and finishing it at the same time. Now, let's say I know that that will actually, it will go for 4 months, but it will keep going until a month after construction. So I just adjust that by 1 month. That pushes the start date back, and that goes a little bit past the end of the main construction period. Now, I can do a similar thing for early works and demolition. That's going to be tied back to the start of the construction period. So once again, life cycle, none, code relationship. Now this one's going to be start finish. No, actually this one's going to be start, because I'm going to tie them to when they start. Again, code main works. Again, let's say we expect early works to go for 3 months, but it's going to start 1 month earlier. So we'll do -1. So that starts 1 month earlier, and that that one goes over the first few months of the construction period. And then the ICT contractor is going to be similar to the FF&E. So we're going to use finish start, main works, but let's say this one's much shorter because they just come in at the end and deliver and set up the equipment. So that's only going to go for 2 months. And again, we will actually, let's say these guys don't come in until that finishes. So we'll use a different one here. We'll use start finish. Start finish for 2 months. When construction finishes, the ICT contract starts delivering all the ICT equipment. Now, we can use a whole bunch of other methods here. For instance, this town planning application and permits, they're a one-off thing. So, you know, we could say that is a yearly amount that we tie to concept design. And the concept design phase only goes for 3 months. So they will occur in one point in that 3 months. And then some of the other ones here, you know, some of these engineer ones, I might change a bunch of these to monthly and tie them to the design phase, because they, you know, we're just going to be spending that money in the design phase. And the rest of it, I can decide, you know, yes, we'll leave that as an S-curve for the whole project, or, you know, we could say it's a monthly amount for the whole project, or a, I don't know, it could be a quarterly amount. You can play around with various options and linking various things. And what we're doing here is basically we're building up a cash flow model of our budget. And in this case, I'm tying things back to the, you know, the main works, and we're using either, you know, the design phase, the construction phase, or the whole of project data to look at it. So once I'm happy with all of that, I hit save. And as you can see, this has now changed when these dates are all occurring. So here's a bunch of things that are only happening early on. Other ones stayed spread over the whole thing. And it's changed the picture of when this information has been phased. And I go to the dashboard here, and we can see the shape of that is very different to what it was before. Before it was a smooth S-curve for the whole thing. Now we've got a lumpy bit here, then a bit of an S-curve there for construction, finishing construction, and then a tail of spending over the defects period. So have a play with that and ask any questions if you have them. So that's auto phasing. Now we're going to look at benchmark phasing, which uses your project history from completed projects to create a profile for a current project. So again, I go into auto phasing. Again, I'm working with the budget and my post contract here, but up the top here at bulk phasing, instead of leaving that as manual and selecting all of this or using one of these bulk phasing methods, I'm going to use the bulk phasing method here of benchmark. And when I do that, a whole lot of other stuff appears. Now, the first thing that we need to do is to decide on the projects that are going to be used by the algorithm to generate the phasing S-curve for this project. So rather than using a standard S-curve, we're using actuals on projects that have occurred in the past to generate the S-curve for this project. And the idea is that if these projects were similar in nature, then they're a better model for generating a baseline S-curve than me trying to do it manually. The profile of the spend is going to be similar, and we can combine a bunch of them together based on some attributes as well to work out the best fit and use that for the next project. So what we get is a series of filters. So the first one is our sector filter. And if yours doesn't have commercial selected, tick commercial, because there's a whole lot of data in the commercial sector. But, you know, I could look at it and say, I also want hospitality and residential projects to choose from. And you see that got a little bit longer there, but there's in this particular deployment, there's the most information against the commercial sector. So if your project's not a commercial sector project, make sure you tick that box. So this gives me a list of projects. It gives me the total phased actuals and the dates of when they occurred. That's all nice. I can then, you know, refine that further by using the project type or the service line. I'm going to leave that as project management, or I can use some custom field categories. Now, we've not really played around with custom fields. These are project custom fields, but these are set up by your system administrator and can be used to capture additional information about your project. In Unify, we call this benchmark information, and you'll see why. If I click a couple of these, building area and building functional units, I'll get a whole lot more information being displayed here and here. And so the building area ones here are so FECA, which stands for fully enclosed covered area, and I get a minimum and maximum for that. UCA, I think, is undercover area. NLA is net lettable area, and then gross floor area. So these obviously building areas, and then building functional units, we've got car spaces, lifts, floors, and floors below ground. And as you can see, this information is also displayed here as well. So I can use these to filter this. And let's say I'm only interested in things that have got a FECA, fully enclosed covered area, of a minimum of 2,000 square meters. So when I do that, that filters the list down to just these two options. Everything else either didn't have any FECA information, or that was or it was below that. So the idea here, don't get too hung up on this, but the idea here is if we have captured this information in these projects, which are completed projects, we can use this to select projects that are similar enough to this current project and create a cash flow profile on that basis. So I've looked at this and said, yep, these two projects, I'm broadly happy with these two office developments. These are similar enough in nature for me to use as a benchmark for my current project. Now, let's just see what happens with this. So I'll keep this tab open here. That's my current cash flow profile. And you'll see now that's changed all of these to benchmark. So I'm just going to benchmark the whole thing. And it's actually kept, you know, that I still want this to be benchmarked on the construction phase. And, you know, that still only applies to the concept design phase. And all those relationships are there. Now I can clear all of these and just make it benchmark everything, but I can also still use this model. So I'm going to keep those in there and hit save. And that will have now recut those S-curves to match those other projects. So if I've got, that's what it was before. If I just refresh this, whoop, you'll see that's changed shape. So which is interesting. There's obviously something in the data of those other projects that means there's a slow in spending around this time, and then it picks up again. So don't know what that is, but that's what the data says from the other projects. Yeah, that's how that works. So the phasing that's here now, the way that's spread out has been determined by the spread of the actuals on the existing projects. Now, I can do a combination of all of these things: manual, auto, and benchmark. So I'll go back into auto phasing here. When I go back in here, it doesn't remember my benchmark project selection. I've got to select that again, but that's okay. But it does remember the, you know, everything else that was selected. Now, I might go down to some of these and say, you know, contingency, I don't want to use benchmark. You know, I want that to be a monthly amount over the whole project, a nice even number across the whole project. That's the rule we're doing for contingency on this project for some reason. And the town planning permits and those ones, I'm just going to put them in manually because it's putting them in a date that I don't like. None of the phasing options are putting it in the right date. So I'm going to change them to manual. And the early works one, I've looked at what's happening with that, and it looks like that's just going to be a regular monthly amount here. So I'm going to change that to monthly as well. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to change the architect one to an S-curve. So as you can see here, we've got manual amounts, monthly, and benchmarked, and we've got a whole bunch of code relationships. So we can keep building up the complexity of this model to suit. And again, you know, I can look at this and say, I only want the projects with big numbers in them. So I'll select those two, that $4 million one and that $17 million one. That'll do. Hit save, and that will generate my new profile, keeping in mind that I set the town planning and permits to manual. And this data here was what was there from what was phased before. So I'm going to delete those out and put in that we expect to pay this in December for the full amount, and that one in December as well for the full amount, and hit save. So in this case, I've manually phased those two lines. Now, if I go down the bottom here, you see that straight line amount of contingency means that that's a nice even amount there. And when I go back to the dashboard, we've got another profile. It's changed again ever so slightly in our cash flow profile. So again, here we're just looking at the result of that last model that I did. But before we dig into that, let's just jump back into this again. And so we've done our budgets. So we're now going to move on to auto-phasing our forecast as opposed to our budget. So our budget is our baseline. Oh, actually, I just remembered one thing we haven't done with our budget. So we've got our budget forecast here. I'm going to go back to budget here. And if you recall, we snapshot our budgets earlier to set them up as our original and our approved budgets. When you snapshot a budget here, it also snapshots the cash flow. So even though all that's being displayed on the page here is the budget, the current budget that you're editing, it's it also includes the snapshot of the cash flow. So this can be really useful if you're wanting to compare different budget baseline scenarios. So what was your original profile, and then a revised baseline profile. Saving the snapshot also saves this data. So we didn't have it in our earlier snapshot. So if I save a snapshot now, the snapshot here with cash flow, oh, life cycle phase, whole project. Thank you very much. That will include the phasing data that I can see here in my manual phasing screen set to budget. It'll include that profile as part of the snapshot. Okay, so now that we've saved our snapshot, we can move on to auto-phasing our forecast. And we have all the same options available to us with our forecast. So in my manual phasing view here, I can now set that back to all. And it will reload this screen. And for each line item, it will show me my actual forecast, my budget, and any variance to that. So up the top here, where it's all consolidated at the project level, I can see the actual forecast has only phasing of 82,700. So the variance to the budgeted phasing is, 65.6 million. And that's because we haven't phased our forecast yet. And that 82,700 is the actuals that we have to date. Now, again, I have the manual phasing method available to me. So I can go $1 million, $1 million, $1 million, and so on, and manually phase an item here. I can use the copy budget, which will copy the budget phasing into my forecast phasing. So when I hit that, you'll see now that we have a phase total here of 6 million just from hitting copy budget. But there's still a variance here of 4 million. So I think my phasing started in September. So I'll look at it from September. And because there was no actuals or in September, and on the 82,000 in budget, in actuals for October, remember that when we close off financial periods and we're looking into the past, what we see in actual/forecast is the actuals. So we've got actuals up to this point and then forecast from November on. When I've copied my budget, it doesn't copy the budget for the past because that would be an actual. So they're blank. And those amounts there really relate to the $4 million variance, because you can see there it is there, 2.7 plus 1.3, that's 4 million. So there's my variance there in the past. So I didn't spend as much as I expected to for the first 2 months of the project. So at the very beginning of the project, when you set up a baseline budget, you would just hit copy budget because you have no reason for your forecast to be any different to your budget. But now that things are happening and things have changed, I can change my forecast and then adjust my budget accordingly. So if I go into the time module here, and there we are. So I'd show you this, some different things that different views that we now get, our Gantt chart and timeline. If I go into my schedule, let's say that we're running a month behind on everything. So I'm going to push that out to the end of December. This isn't going to start till January, and we all know, does construction ever really start in January? Let's say it's not really going to start until the end of February. Given that, it's probably not going to be finished till the end of February 2023. So this needs to become March 2023. And then that becomes February 2024. Save those dates, and then we can see up here on our Gantt visually how that's all slipped from our baseline. So now when I go back into the costs module, and look, got a cash flow profile building up here, and go into manual phasing. Sorry, I mean go into auto phasing. And I will change this setting here from budget to forecast. Now, I can still use benchmarking, but I'm going to put that to manual for the moment. So when we go into forecast mode, clicking on too many things here. When we go into forecast mode, any actuals that have happened will get deducted off these amounts. So we don't, reforecast any actuals. And I've got, the whole shebang to play with here. So, I can set up, an S-curve for the whole thing, whole of project. I've got all the same things to play around with. But what I'm going to do here is leave early works and main works as manually phased and just S-curve the rest, just to keep it simple. So you can do whatever you like with these ones, but I want you to leave early works and main works there as manual. And then we'll hit save. And we can see then that we've still got data in there for early works and main works because I had thrown some stuff in. But I want to take that out. And I'm just going to change this view here to actual forecast only. And we got a whole lot of things here, including uncontracted. Don't worry too much about that. I'm just going to click on main works and hit clear, because I want this early works and main works to be nil. Now I'll change it back to this all view. So we've used auto phasing to just S-curve everything except for our early works and main works, and we switched into actual forecast mode only and selected the code for early works and main works and hit clear to make sure they're nil. There's no phasing against those. So I asked you all to download a Cashflow Excel spreadsheet, and this is the spreadsheet. So we're in a situation where the works have started, and each month the contractor is giving us their cash flow of when they're expecting to be doing the work and what they're going to be spending each month. And in doing a forecast, it's always about what is the best information that I have at hand. And the best information for what's happening with the early works and the construction works is what the contractor is doing. They're looking at it in much more detail and giving us more information. So I want to use their cash flow profile rather than one that I've come up with. And then I'll just compare that to my baseline and see how we're tracking. So we have this here in Excel. And this is almost all the information that we need. That's not quite all the information that we need. I'll just zoom in a bit here so it's a bit more visible. So we can see that we've got a description here of early works and construction. That's nice. It's split up to match what I've got. We've got dates across the top, across there, and we've got a total. But what we need to match to and unify are the codes that we're using. So in this case, 100.1 and 100.2. We need to match to that. So what I do is I just insert a column in here. I'll label that code and do 100.1 and 100.2, and then save that. So that means Unify can tie it back into the right code that we're using. So then I just select all of this, and I don't have to select it exactly, just so I've got the data in there. Control C to copy. Back into Unify, and I click on the import button. And that gives me this paste from Excel view. Now, first of all, I need to make sure I'm pasting against the right chart of accounts. So post contract here. And also I'm importing into my forecast. You can see there's various options to import against: budget, forecast, and even actuals in some circumstances. You probably won't have actuals as an option. But we can import actuals from Excel if that's how they're going to get into Unify. So I do Control V to paste. And as you can see, I get a whole lot of ticks and things here. Unify has validated this data. It has ignored columns that are irrelevant to it, and it's picked up the ones that it knows what to do with. So because I had labeled that column as code, it has recognized that and has matched those codes to the codes that we've got in post contract. It's then also gone, oh, yep, we've got all the months across here. Dum-da-dum, that's all happy. If there was anything wrong here, I would get, there'd be red, and you'd be able to hover on things and it will tell you what was wrong. Like, there's no code that says, column that says code or something like that. So reset will just clear this, and save will import the selected data as the little pop-up box is telling me. So I click save. And that's all gone green to tell me that that's worked. And then I hit close. And I can see now that that cash flow profile has been imported. So each month when I get the revised one, I can just import that, and that's that part of the cash flow profile done. If I go back to my dashboard, so what we can see here is that we've got a very different cash flow profile for our forecast, our actuals and our forecast compared to our budget. And really, I can look at that and say, well, you know, the whole project here, we expected to spend about 10 million by November. We're not actually spending that until May. The whole thing is really running several months behind based on the cash flow. It's going to take much longer for things to ramp up. Once they do ramp up, yep, the speed of construction is going to be about what we thought it would be. It's just going to take longer to get there. So it tells me here that this particular profile that I had worked out was, you know, perhaps a little too optimistic. And I can look at that, and if I look at that and say, well, my whole baseline was, you know, as it turned out, not very useful, or it may have been fine at the time, but a number of things have happened that have caused this particular delay, or it's just flat out wrong, whatever the case is. If I go back into manual phasing, and if this profile that I've now got against my actual and my forecast, if that is going to be much more useful to me as a baseline, I can hit this rebaseline button, and this will copy the profile that I've got in my forecast to my budget. So before we did copy budget to move it from the budget to the forecast, now we're going to do rebaseline to move it from the forecast into the budget. So it will delete all the budget auto phasing settings, which I actually want it to do in this case. So all that complicated auto phasing that we did is going to be blown away because we've rebaselined from the actual forecast line here. So I hit OK, and that's done. So there's a bit of a variance here, but you know, it's only 400 grand against $65 million. And I go back to my dashboard, and you will see we've just got one line here now. So that, but let's say things got delayed even more. And say we move that out by even just a month. And that out by a month. Back into my costs. Oh, and you can see that has already caused a difference there in the phasing, because even though we blew away all the auto phasing for the budget, the auto phasing for the forecast has been kept. And when I updated the dates, it rephased all of this stuff in that whole of project view. So that has changed the profile ever so slightly. So everything we've been doing thus far for the forecast is what I call code level forecasting. So here's our set of cost codes in our chart of accounts, and we've been forecasting at this level. But in the contracts module, we only have one contract here. We can go down to the level of detail that we have within a contract. And you'll see when so I've drilled into the architecture contract that we set up before. And when I go to the schedule section here, you'll see we have auto phasing settings. Link to life cycles. So for instance here, concept design, I can say, well, I'll link that to the concept design. Schematic design, if I had dates for the schematic or even had a schematic design, which I don't, I could select it to that. But, you know, I can do the whole thing to concept design. Here. And phasing, you know, monthly S-curve, whatever it is, let's go S-curve. So let's just do the whole thing. Concept design, S-curve. And that has phased out this contract. So if you oops, didn't select S-curve here. So there we are, that's better. No variance there with everything set to S-curve. So this is giving me a profile for how I might be spending this. And if I change that there to whole of project, select it at the top, it should apply it all the way down. There we are. That's now shifted that to out across the whole of the project. So again, we're using these dates that we've put in, but we're doing it at a more detailed level here. Now, this is just to show you that this exists and can be used, and it may be useful for you in some circumstances. It's typically used when you're managing a revenue contract. So if you're doing your own billing out of Unify, then this is a really good level to be doing things at, because you'll have everything here that you're billing. You might be only billing it, you know, have 1 or 2 revenue codes that this maps to, so you don't have that big long structure. And it's a useful way to be phasing things out for revenue purposes. Typically for cost, it's too detailed, but there may be exceptions to that. So it's here and it's available and it's very useful and it has a lot of the similar features that we've been looking at in the manual and auto phasing part of the costs module. It doesn't have benchmarking. So it's a little bit different, and it does have importing, so you can also import a cash flow profile against that as well. So the only thing to pay attention to is that if you start phasing at a contract level, as Obi-Wan said, forever will it dominate your destiny. So Unify always works at the bottom, the lowest level you're working at up. And if you start phasing anything from a contract level, that is a level below your cost codes. So we've got our cost codes here. If we go to the value view, there's the architect level. This is now 1, 2 levels below that, because we've got 2 levels here in the contract. It's actually 3 levels below. The contract's the level, then we've got the level 1 of the contract, then we've got level 2 of the contract. So we've gone 3 levels below the cost code level. So you imagine that's a lot more detail to look at. And if I go into the cost module here and go into, well, if I go into auto phasing, you'll notice the forecast has vanished, because I can no longer auto phase my forecast here at the code level, because I have started auto phasing at the contract level. So it changes the way the system works. Unify's gone, you're doing contract phasing. You must do it all that way. And when I go into manual phasing and switch to actual forecast, you can see here under consultants, there's the architectural services, and there's the contract phasing here, and it's all grayed out. So now for the purposes of today's training, you don't need to do that and play around with this. But I wanted to show you that it was there, but it makes the whole for a cost forecast where you've got a large chart of accounts that you're reporting against, you can go to the contract level, but it makes things much, much, much more complicated and much more detailed, which may be useful to you. But in most cases, we'll just make it more complicated. So I'm not saying do it or don't do it. I'm saying in most cases, you probably don't need to do it. If your cost code structure is the level of detail you need to look at things at and you're reporting against, then there's no value going down to the granular level of contract phasing. If you're mostly working in contracts, then that's what is going to be useful to you. And typically, if you're managing your revenue, that's what you're doing. And look, there are exceptions on each side of it. So, but it is a much, much, much more detailed, view to be looking at. You'll notice here, there's this uncontracted thing here, which is, basically this is how we get the next level down where you don't have, so this relates to my forecast to complete and my total uncommitted amount, or the untendered amount here in the manual phasing view. So that amount is the uncontracted. So when I come down to the architect here, we can see we had a project total of 4.3 million. In the contract, we've let 3.7 million, and we have an uncontracted amount there of 5.47. Now I can manually phase that, or I can click on uncontracted, which gives me all the uncontracted values coming from the forecast to complete view. So you see here, this is my auto phasing screen back again. And, if I S-curve, whole of project, everything, and hit save, that'll give that profile to everything. But what I've just done is overridden my good old manual upload of the early works and the main works. So I've lost that particular profile here. So as you can see, that's now very different from what we were looking at before, because it's not reflecting. It's just reflecting that standard S-curve and not the import that we did. So yeah, that's contract level phasing, which for the sort of stuff we've been looking at over this training session is typically not what you would be doing. Typically, doing all this phasing at the code level is what you will need to do and will meet all your needs. But it is there, it works. It's useful in some circumstances where you need to go to more levels of detail. All right, I've said that enough times, I think. The other thing I just wanted to point out here was that as we've been populating this information, you will have noticed that all these charts within Unify have been populating with data. We've been looking at this cash flow one here as the various cash flow profiles have changed as we've been playing around with it. But this cost forecast breakdown here is, giving us a pie chart there of what that's looking like. And we've got these, target graphs here. So actuals to date, our target for what we were, spending, which is, comes from what was in the budget, and the forecast here. At the moment, these match perfectly because we re-baselined. And in that re-baselining, they became aligned, but, they may be, as each month goes past, that will change. And we can see whether we're meeting the target, of the actuals and the forecast and so on. So that just leaves one more thing to do for today. So we did our budget, we did auto phasing of our forecast, and we imported data. We played with contract level phasing, and we saw how that changed everything. So now all I need to do is update my PCG report. So back into documents. Here's my PCG report from last week. I click on the name of that report to the document name to open it up. Here it is here. But as you recall, this was missing all the cash flow data. So I now hit edit. And when you're editing a document, the first thing you'll get if I do save and continue here is it says editing this document will create a new version. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. So when you edit documents in Unify, Unify does version control for you. I'm now in version 2 of the document, which is actually pointed out here by my version control table, which will be automatically populated into this document. So there's version 1, there's version 2. Now, most of this information hasn't changed, so I can skip most of these steps and just go to the stuff that has changed. So financial year versus budget. There we are. So we've now got actuals and year to date and phased forecasting. So that's all looking good. I can then skip to my cash flow step. And this is going to bring in a graph here, but I need to change the chart of accounts to post-contract and click update. And there we are. There's our S-curve where it ended up, populating into there. And now I'll just skip to the finish step. So I don't need to update every single step of the document with this. If nothing else has changed from last week, only the stuff that relate to cash flow, I can skip to finish. So if you recall last time, we went through every single step of the document to create the document. But in this case, I'm just updating the stuff that needs to be updated in version 2. I get to here, I'll set that back to open for review. So private is like, checked out, it means I'm editing this document. It means no one else can go in and edit it. And then open for review means that others can see it now. And I do view document. There we can see there's the different version. My executive summary hasn't changed. Scroll down. Here's some of my spend for October, spend year to date, total for the financial year. There's my cost report. That hasn't changed. And there's my cash flow profile based on everything we've done today. So just a couple of things to show you before we close out. Back in the cost module, we've mostly we've had this view here of, looking at these graphs to see this information as, this data has been changing, but there are other views in here. If I turn the charts off, everything we've done today, none of it has changed this view here because we did not update our contracts or our, untendered or our contingency. That was all last week. We didn't update our budget. That was all the week before. But I've got this financial view and this mixed view here. So if I go to financial, so this is going to show me the current financial year here, actuals to date, my forecast cash flow, the total, and against the phase. And we've got a bit of variance here because we played around with it. So there I'm looking at the difference between what's, phased from my actuals and my forecast to my phased budget for the financial year. I can change this to any other financial years. They're all listed here. Or I can even go all years and see the phase data for the whole project here. And in this view for the whole project, we also see the budget for the whole project there as just an extra little bit of information to compare against. So that's a financial view. And again, if I do, level 2 here, I get a more summary view that's easier to read on the screen. And if I then change this to the mixed view, what I get now is I still get my financial year filter. So I get my approved budget, which is the overall project budget, commitments to date, actuals to date, remaining amount that's committed that I haven't spent, any uncommitted variations, and my remaining budget spend. So it's a different view. of the data here. So you've got those 3 different dashboards to choose from. But I have found, since we implemented these charts, that what I like to see is shown in the charts. So I'm finding I'm looking at those other dashboards there less often because the charts is giving me such a great view of the world. I can see what the actuals are, even when I'm in my regular cost reporting contracted view, which is the one I use the most. And finally, so we had a look at our Power BI dashboards. That's an embedded dashboard here that's, and we did look at this one in some of the other sessions. So hopefully you've now got a bit of an idea of where all this is coming from. So this is not the same project that we're looking at, it's a different project. Information about where variations have come from, estimate of completion, cost to complete, work completed to date, cash flow. Here is some breakdown of what the progress claims have been on this particular one. So hopefully from these training sessions, you've got a good idea of where all this info comes from. But there are also reports. So into the menu, reporting and reports, that gives us to the reports module. And we can go to cash flow reports here. And there's a whole bunch of cash flow reports here, some of which are net, so include revenue, and some which are just cost. If I go to project cash flow, this just gives me my mask facility here. Dates, I know mine started in, I'll just look at the current financial year. So I'll just select current financial year as my date range for this. Actuals to, I want to see actuals to October 2021. And the cost budget version, you remember how I snapshot the budget? So I'm going to select my with cash flow one because that has the snapshotted budget. I select view. And this gives me a report of this information that we've been looking at for the current financial year. And below that, there's just the current financial year when we're looking at that in the cost curve. And this I can choose to download to Excel by selecting Excel and then view, and that will give me this in Excel. But there's a whole bunch of other cash flow reports there too. And just a bit of a recap too, under project reports, you've got your various registers, your project costs report. So if you want to get that costs contracted dashboard out into Excel or to PDF, these reports will do that for you. And if you're running across a bunch of programs, the program cost reports will do that for you, running across a whole range of projects. And there are also contract reports here to explore as well, to give you a different view of the world with contracts. So thanks, everyone. That's the end of cost management training for Unify, parts 1, 2, and 3.